boys and girls, it's Miss Manning. Today we are going to be working on lesson 11 where we read a poem about Harriet Tubman. Today we're going to try to focus on determining the structure of this poem and then look at how that structure and other details in the poem help contribute to the poem's theme. So for us to be successful, we have to be able to identify the overall structure of the text or the structure within a text. So stanza by stanza or as the poem as a whole. And then we can describe how smaller sections of the text, those stanzas, provide the overall structure to the text. So we're kind of breaking it apart and looking at it, but also then thinking about different things when it comes to theme, like the language that is used, like the picture that is used, and some of the events that are included into the poem. We have a few by the way words, but the main thing that I want to focus on is idioms. An idiom is just a common phrase that isn't meant to be taken literally. So I put some pictures of examples. If you look at this first picture here of this man, hopefully you can think of this phrase that doesn't mean he literally has it. He doesn't literally have butterflies in his stomach. When somebody says, I had butterflies in my stomach, it means that they're actually nervous. All right, take a look at the next picture. See if you can guess the idiom. Okay, it is raining cats and dogs in this. So when somebody says, man, it's raining cats and dogs outside, they're not literally meaning that cats and dogs are falling from the sky. What they're meaning is that it's raining really hard. So the idiom that they have in the poem is didn't take no stuff. So it's not to say that Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff. It doesn't mean that she didn't steal. When it says she didn't take no stuff, it means she didn't put up with mistreatment or injustice. All right, then while we are reading, it's just page 126 of our text collection. While we're reading, I want you to think about how you can describe the structure and the form of the poem. So the things that you want to think about while listening to the poem, the rhyme, does it rhyme? And what words are chose to rhyme? Does it have a rhythm? Does it kind of have almost like you could put it to music? Focus on individual lines and then think about what information each stanza has in it. And that's going to help you describe the structure. So if the first stanza has information and then the last stanza has information that happened after, then we would say that the stanzas are in chronological order. Or if one stanza talks about feeling and the next stanza talks about what you can hear and the next stanza talks about what you can see, maybe the organization would be the sentence. Harriet Tubman by Eloise Greenfield. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither. Didn't come into this world to be no slave and wasn't going to stay one either. Farewell, she sang to her friends one night. She was mighty sad to leave 'em, but she ran away in that dark, hot night, ran out looking for her freedom. She ran to the woods and she ran through the woods with the slave catchers right behind her. And she kept going till she got to the north where those mean men couldn't find her. 19 times she went back south to get 300 others. She ran for her freedom 19 times to save black sisters and brothers. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither, didn't come into this world to be no slave, and didn't stay one either. And didn't stay one either. We're going to paraphrase the first two lines of our poem, and paraphrase just means that we're going to put it in our own words. So I'm going to have you go ahead and pause the video and see if you can put those first two lines in your own words. All right, so I went ahead and paraphrased it. And remember, when we talked about didn't take no stuff, we meant that she wasn't going to put up with stuff. So I went ahead and, based on what I know about Harriet Tubman from our previous story, I put in what she wouldn't put up with. She's not going to put up with injustice or mistreatment. And the next line, wasn't scared of nothing neither. I said that she wasn't afraid of slave catchers. She wasn't afraid of the slave owners. She wasn't afraid of people that could have turned her in. So she really wasn't afraid of anyone. And when we look at the first 4 lines of this passage, we want to kind of see how it's different from standard English. So when I see that it says she didn't take no stuff, we wouldn't be talking like that now. We wouldn't be using Some of the phrasing that she uses, like nothing neither, we would say she's not scared of anything. We wouldn't say didn't come into the world to be no slave. We would say she didn't come into the world to be a slave, and wasn't going to stay one either. So the reason that this is slightly different from standard English is the author wanted it to sound like it came from Harriet Tubman's lips. Like Harriet Tubman had said it, and Harriet Tubman was a slave. She didn't have much of an education, so she wouldn't have talked the way that you would speak now or the way that you would write a paper or something like that. But it gives more power to the poem because it sounds like words that Harriet Tubman said. So I went ahead and I put this in my own words. Harriet Tubman didn't put up with mistreatment. She wasn't afraid of anything. She wasn't born a slave and wasn't going to continue to be a slave. So this is what standard English would sound like, something like that. But the author obviously chose to put it in a different tone to help with the story. So in our first 4 lines, we can see that this line 3 and line 4 relate to line 1 and 2. So in line 3 and 4, she says she didn't want to be a slave and she wasn't going to stay one. But that relates to up here where she says that she's not going to put up with mistreatment and she's not scared of anyone. So she's not afraid to fight for freedom from slavery. That was the conclusion that I drew for how those would relate to the first 2 lines. So now I want you to look through the rest of the poem and look for details that support the idea that Harriet Tubman wasn't afraid to fight for freedom from slavery. So you're going to go ahead and pause the video now and look for details. All right, so what I found, I'm not going to give you all of them, but one that I found is that she ran away that dark, hot night. And I think back to the Road to Freedom book, and when Emma and her mom ran away, it was the nighttime, and they talked about how scary that, or Emma talked about how scary that was. I also think about myself. If I'm walking my dog at night, I can't, every sound seems to be amplified, I can't see who's behind me and things like that. So the fact that she ran away by herself at night is kind of a scary idea, but she wasn't afraid because she wanted to fight for her freedom. She wanted to escape. Then also this part here where it says that she's running through the woods with the slave catchers right behind her. That's got to be a scary time, especially when we think back to our story Road to Freedom, when Emma and her mom were in the woods and the slave catchers were there. They had to lie really still in a pile of leaves. And what did the slave catchers bring with them? They brought the dogs. So it can be a really scary thing, but Harriet Tubman wasn't afraid of that. So what I want you to do is looking through the rest of it, see where you can find more details where she wasn't afraid to fight for her freedom from slavery. How do we know that? So when we start talking about determining the theme of this poem, we have to look at all the different elements that this poem has in it. Specifically, the elements of the events of our poem, the tone, and the images. So first, let's just kind of look at the events in this poem. And when I first look through, it talks about Harriet Tubman running away from slavery for the first time, and then the multiple times that she went back. So I would write down under events, I would write that she refused to stay in slavery and she escaped by herself and then went back 19 times, rescuing 300 people. So that would be the part that I would take into account when I'm trying to determine the theme of this poem. Next, we're going to focus on the images. And this doesn't mean the pictures that come along with the poem, but this means the images that the words kind of create in your mind. So when I look at the hot, dark night that she is running away from, I can picture that in my head. The fact that she's describing the temperature, the fact that she's describing what it looks like, the fact that I know she's running away from slave catchers, and the fact that the slave catchers are right behind her while she's running to the woods, then running through the woods, and they're following her all along. It kind of lets you know that there is some danger involved. And so it creates all of these images in your mind. So I would put that she runs in the dark hot night, she ran to the woods and through the woods, the slave catchers are right behind her. Those were all things that I would include. So then last, when we look at the tone, we have to think about the poem and the the dialect that they were using, which we talked about was supposed to sound like it came directly out of Harriet Tubman's mouth. And also the rhythm and the repetitiveness that they did include. So I have that it is repetitive and rhythmic. I could easily see this being put to music. And it's also the tone of it is they're celebrating what Harriet Tubman did and what she wasn't afraid of, what she was willing to fight for. And that's the whole tone of this poem. So you have to look at all three of these things and try to come up with what you think the lesson that you're supposed to learn from this poem, or what's the central message the author's trying to teach you from this poem. So I'd like you to create the theme of this poem. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.